World of Warfare presents
Germany after World War I. After Germany's defeat in the First World War, German sailors and soldiers mutinied against Kaiser Wilhelm II, forcing his abdication from the throne on November 9, 1918. The next day, a provisional government was cobbled together between members of the Social Democratic Party and the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany, effectively shifting power away from the German military. A new constitution was drafted in the city of Weimar, giving hope to a war-weary people. That all ended with the crippling reparations outlined in the Treaty of Versailles, and while reparations alone failed to account for Germany's ensuing financial turmoil, it directly served as a powerful catalyst for the social and economic calamity to come, both in Germany and the rest of the Western world. At first, deflation and high unemployment pressed firmly on the young Weimar Republic, and when Germany failed to pay its initial reparation installment of 20 billion marks, as assessed by the Treaty of Versailles, only 8 billion marks had reached Allied coffers by a May deadline in 1921. The shortfall was rolled into the final indemnity established by the Reparation Committee at the League of Nations, which required the German nation to pay a total of 132 billion marks in annual installments of 3 billion marks a year. While famed British economist and philosopher Maynard Keynes had already lambasted the Big Four Allied leaders for their massive financial impunity against the Germans in his wildly popular book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, Keynes yet again pushed back at the Reparation Commission's 3 billion marks a year assessment, concluding that the most the German economy could afford was about 1.25 billion marks a year, spread out over a 30-year window. While Allied leaders continued to work out the terms of the Treaty of Paris, the Weimar Republic and the German military had been putting down a string of communist uprisings and political assassinations, including Marxist intellectuals Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, who were murdered on January 15, 1919, by members of the Freikorps after the Spartacist revolt. The German right, on the other hand, remained hostile to the country's new democratic constitution, which gave full authority to the Reichstag while bypassing any authority of the monarchy or the military. Plagued by a failing economy and recent memories of mass starvation in most German cities, in 1920, Weimar leaders announced welfare payments to war victims, as well as proposed plans for youth assistance and more generous unemployment relief benefits. Leery of imposing new taxes on a war-ravaged German public to fund both reparation payments and their new initiatives, the Reichstag closed its budget gap by deliberately pursuing a policy of double-digit inflation, leading Germany's Foreign Minister Walther Rathenau to defend the tactic in a June 1922 meeting with the U.S. ambassador, comparing his country's economy to an army which is completely surrounded, and which, to preserve its existence, must break through, however great its losses, so as to get air and a chance at life for the whole. 10 hours later, Rathenau was murdered by a squad of right-wing terrorists, one of hundreds of political assassinations carried out by an enraged far right in the aftermath of the Versailles Treaty. For a time anyway, the Reichstag's inflationist strategy helped the nation tread water, and while prices of consumer goods rose 40 times the mark's pre-war value, wages and employment generally kept pace with the mark's inflationary rise. Germany's brief period of calm and rising prosperity collapsed yet again in November of 1922, after the German government failed to make a reparation payment to France, leading the new conservative French Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré to order a military invasion of the coal-rich Ruhr Valley on January 11, 1923, reasoning that French control of lucrative German coal mines would more than compensate French taxpayers for all the costs of military occupation. Backlash from the court of public opinion was swift in the United States and Great Britain, leading Keynes to write that, "I think their action is wrong on law and on morals and on expediency," while British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald denounced France's occupation as evil. Despite a near universal condemnation of French occupation, nationalist political factions in Germany devolved into vocal outrage, leading Weimar leaders to openly guarantee financial support for a popular resistance by the citizens of the Ruhr Valley, who in turn refused to work in the occupied mines, sabotaged rail cars, and engaged in violent altercations with French soldiers, leading to the deaths of an estimated 120 German citizens and the forced exile of some 147,000 residents of the Ruhr Valley. The international political turmoil associated with France's occupation led to swift and debilitating reactions in currency markets, rapidly eroding international confidence in the mark, which led to a devastating period of hyperinflation. For instance, in January of 1923, $1 could buy 7,260 German marks, yet by August of that same year, $1 could buy an unfathomable 6 million marks. To make matters ever more precarious, by the end of the year, one pre-war gold mark could be exchanged for nearly 1 trillion post-war paper marks, destroying hard-earned fortunes and savings of average Germans as commerce broke down and unemployment skyrocketed to 20%. Political consequences proved to be equally catastrophic, leading to the deaths of dozens of Germans in a communist uprising in Hamburg in an attempt to secede from the Weimar Republic, while in Munich, Adolf Hitler and arch-nationalist General Erich Ludendorff staged their now infamous beer hall putsch. During the two would-be leaders' stay at Landsberg prison, Hitler wrote the first draft of Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, dictated by his loyal friend and fellow revolutionary Rudolf Hess. The Nazis continued to exploit German anger and desperation caused by occupation and hyperinflation, which in turn secured their foothold in German politics after they won 32 Reichstag seats following an election in May of 1924. The international financial order envisioned within the Treaty of Versailles continued to fall apart, prompting many leaders to agree with Keynes's assessment that Germany had been saddled with an unrepayable debt. In response, President Woodrow Wilson placed a 2-year moratorium on repayment in 1919, followed by President Warren G. Harding in 1923, who eased the pressure on the German economy by extending repayment schedules to more than 60 years, a move that was bitterly resented by Great Britain, when annual reparation payments from Germany was less than the loan interest payments the nation had taken on to fund England's war efforts against German aggression. In search of a more lasting answer to Germany's ongoing political and social crisis, President Calvin Coolidge deputized the House of Morgan as the unofficial facilitator of U.S. foreign policy on the matter of German reparations. Despite his outright contempt for all things German, J.P. Morgan and his powerful bank helped rescue the German economy through a project known as the Dawes Plan, so named after Morgan-allied Chicago banker, future U.S. Vice President and Nobel laureate Charles Dawes. Managed by Morgan's partner Thomas Lamont and Owen D. Young, the head of Morgan's General Electric and Radio Corporation of America, the Dawes Plan focused on lessening the weight of German reparations while pushing the French out of the Ruhr, with the hope of restarting European trade, which had all but collapsed under the auspices of German hyperinflation. The Dawes Plan extended Germany's repayment window by several more decades, creating a new repayment formula based on Germany's capacity to pay, gauged by the fluctuating state of Germany's post-war economic conditions. The plan also indexed the amount of reparations paid by Germany to the tax burden borne by British and French taxpayers, which in turn was based on the amount of money each Allied country owed to the United States. Other incentives included a $100 million loan to Germany, as well as a matching loan to France, provided the French withdrew their forces from the Ruhr. In what some economists have labeled a shell game of sorts, the U.S. loaned money to Germany, who turned it over to France and Great Britain in the form of reparations, which was ultimately sent back to the U.S. in the name of war debts accumulated by both nations during the First World War, effectively jump-starting European and transatlantic trade after years of crushing stagnation. The Dawes Plan was further helped along by German Chancellor Gustav Stresemann, who agreed to restart reparation payments as specified by the plan. And as German industry returned to normal after the chaos of occupation and hyperinflation, Stresemann brought about a second German triumph, this time at Locarno in Switzerland. Under the Locarno Pact of 1925, France, Belgium, and Germany agreed to honor each other's borders between their adjoining nations, while Britain promised to support any country that was invaded by a foreign power. Old enmities between the Germans and our European neighbors began to ease in response, while Germany, ironic as it may seem, no longer feared the threat of an invasion by a foreign power. Finally, at Geneva in September of 1926, Germany became a full member of the League of Nations. Despite all these improvements to Germany's economy and social order, the Weimar Republic continued to struggle with its burdensome debts from World War I, leading to the 1928 Young Plan, which lowered Germany's obligation to 121 billion gold marks, until the dawn of the Great Depression once again threw Germany and the rest of the world into a state of financial devastation. In an attempt to thwart disaster, President Herbert Hoover placed a one-year moratorium on reparation payments in 1931, and while Allied delegates attempted to write off all German reparation debt at the Lausanne Conference of 1932, the U.S. Congress refused to sign the resolution, leaving Germany on the hook for years to come. Soon after Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, he canceled all payments as he sought to overturn the entire validity of the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler's refusal was seen by Germans as an act of patriotism and courage by a people who saw reparation payments as a form of ultimate humiliation. After Germany's defeat in the Second World War, the country yet again faced off with spiraling national chaos, leaving millions of Germans displaced from bombed-out cities. By war's end, an estimated 5.5 million German combatants and some 8.8 million German civilians had been killed. Most German institutions had crumbled under the pressures of war, while the German populace sat at the brink of starvation. In 1949, Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones and eventually split in 2, and while reparation payments seemed like an impossibility at first, West German President Konrad Adenauer struck a deal with Western nations in 1953 at the London Debt Conference, which required West Germany to repay war reparations only when Germany had a trade surplus, at the same time canceling a significant amount of Germany's debt and extending the nation's repayment window. Bolstered further by the Marshall Plan, Germany became an economic miracle as it soon became Europe's fastest-growing economy. After German reunification following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Germany slowly chipped away at the last of her reparation debt, making one final payment on October 3, 2010, on the 20th anniversary of German reunification, making post-World War I Germany an ongoing study in sovereign responsibility.